I was 17 when my father dragged my suitcase down the stairs, let it slam against every step, then tossed it onto the driveway like it was full of garbage. I didn't say anything. My voice had already been stripped down to silence over the years. My mother stood at the doorway, arms crossed like a statue sculpted out of resentment. He pointed his finger in my face, so close I could smell the bitterness in his breath. "In a month, you'll be back on your knees. Parasite." I cried, of course I did. Not because I believed him, but because I knew he believed every word. I picked up my suitcase, a cheap one with a broken zipper and a single change of clothes inside, and walked away. No hug, no goodbye, just the sound of the screen door slamming behind me. I didn't look back, because if I had, I might have broken. And I couldn't afford to. No job, no apartment, just a prepaid phone with 3% battery and no charger. I slept on a bench that night, ate a stale bagel the next morning, and spent the rest of the week chasing any kind of work that would take a kid with no address and no references. But I made it through that first month, and the one after, and every one that followed. I survived. I endured. And slowly I built. It's been 9 years since that night. And the girl with the torn suitcase? She doesn't exist anymore. Today, I live in a home I bought in full. I run my own business. My name is featured in magazines and startup lists. I mentor women who were told they'd never become anything. And for the last 9 years, I never heard from them. Not a single text. Not even when I graduated college. Not when I was featured in business weeklies, Next Power Builders. Not even when I bought the house that sits just 5 miles from theirs. I became invisible until now. Because last Tuesday, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers. Back-to-back voicemails. Some from my hometown area code. One from a number I knew by heart, even though I had deleted it long ago. I listened to one message. "Camille, it's your mother. Please. We need to talk." We wouldn't be reaching out if it wasn't serious. "Please call." I didn't respond. So they tried again. "It's urgent. It's about the house." And then, "We were sorry." Sorry? After nearly a decade? After leaving your own daughter on the street with nothing but a broken suitcase and a slur echoing in her ears? I stared at my screen, watched the calls come in again, and I smiled. My name is Camille. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the people who left me in the dirt at 17, they just came crawling back. And this time, I'm the one holding the door. If you had looked at our house from the outside, you'd never guess what it felt like to live inside it. White picket fence. Perfect lawn. A mailbox with gold lettering. People at church used to say things like, "You're so lucky, Camille. Your parents seem so put together." But inside, it was a war zone wrapped in good manners. My father ruled like a general. Every word, every decision, every silence his. My mother floated behind him like a ghost in pearls, smiling when people watched, but cold as marble when the doors shut. They didn't hit me. No. Their weapons were quieter, sharper. They punished me with silence, with disapproval, with withholding love unless I conformed. "Straighten your back. Why do you always have to talk so much? Don't be dramatic. Stop drawing, it's a waste of time. Be more like your cousin Jenna. At least she knows how to follow rules." I was a straight-A student, but it was never enough. I remember once coming home with a 98 on a calculus test. Dad glanced at the paper, handed it back without looking at me, and said, "Should have been 100. I stopped showing him my grades after that. I wasn't allowed to decorate my room. No posters. No color. Even birthdays felt transactional. Gifts chosen without thought, like they were checking boxes on a list of things parents were supposed to do. But the control didn't stop at the door. When I was 14, I applied for a local art program. I'd been sketching since I could hold a pencil. It was the only time I felt like I existed. When they found the acceptance letter in my bag, they ripped it up in front of me. "We're not paying for you to chase nonsense. You'll embarrass us." I was grounded for trying. That was love in our house, conditional, earned through obedience, granted only when you were useful. By the time I was 16, I'd stopped dreaming out loud. I just focused on surviving. I got a job at a diner after school and told them it was for character building when really it was so I could stash money in a secret envelope behind my dresser. I told myself, one day I'll leave, and I won't look back. But when that day came, when I stood at the edge of the driveway with that busted suitcase and bruised heart, it still broke me. Because no matter how bad it was, a part of me always hoped they'd love me enough to change. They didn't. They called me a parasite. They said I'd be on my knees in a month. And when I left, they didn't check. Didn't call. Didn't wonder if I was alive. To them, cutting me off wasn't cruelty. It was teaching me a lesson. But here's the twist. I learned it. Just not the one they hoped for. They taught me that silence can be armor. That rejection can be a map. That sometimes the only way to survive is to stop begging for love from people who only speak the language of power. So, I became fluent in my own. And now, years later, they want a conversation? No. They're not ready for the woman they forged in their fire. The first night on the street feels like drowning with your eyes wide open. I had $37 in my pocket and a suitcase that barely closed. My only pair of decent shoes were the ones on my feet, and my only real plan was, don't die. I spent that night in the corner of a 24-hour bus station. I used my hoodie as a pillow. I wrapped my arms around my suitcase like it was a shield. I didn't sleep, not really. Just waited for morning. Waited for something that felt less terrifying than silence. The second night, I met a girl named Danny who worked at a diner. She told me they were short-staffed, and I could try washing dishes. I did. That turned into my first paycheck. The first month passed in a blur of steam burns, stale toast, borrowed jackets, and quarters stacked carefully for cheap coffee and laundry. Every single day, I expected to crack. Every single day, I thought, they were right. I can't do this. But I didn't go back. Not once. Because I knew what waited there wasn't home. It was control. It was shame wrapped in fake forgiveness. It was more of that cold, bitter love they used to keep me small. So I stayed out in the storm and learned to build shelter from scratch. I rented a room from an older woman named Mrs. Lyle. She charged me $100 a month and made soup on Sundays. She didn't ask questions. Didn't judge. Just told me, survival's not pretty, baby, but it's beautiful when you do it. By month 3, I had 2 jobs. By month 6, I had enrolled in night classes using a small community grant. By year 2, I earned a scholarship. I didn't tell anyone. Not a soul. Especially not them. I imagined my mother sipping coffee at the kitchen table, wondering if I was still alive. I imagined my father shaking his head, muttering, "She'll call any day now. Just wait." But the call never came, because each time I wanted to pick up the phone, each time I stood in front of that payphone, quarters in hand, I heard it again. "You'll be back on your knees, parasite." And every time I made the same decision. No. I'll crawl on glass before I crawl back to you. That's what they didn't understand. They thought they broke me by kicking me out. But all they really did was free me. Because once I had nothing, no safety net, no expectations, no hands holding me down, I could finally see what I was capable of. And it wasn't just survival. It was rebirth. Over the next few years, I built my future like it was an act of revenge. Late night studying. Freelance gigs that turned into steady income. Tutoring kids in math for cash under the table. Eventually, I built a consulting business, slowly then suddenly. By 24, I had contracts, savings, and a studio apartment filled with things I earned. Not a single dime from them. Not a single apology from them. And now, 9 years later, with everything I have, they want a seat at my table? Funny. They didn't think I'd last a month. But I've outlived their predictions by nearly a decade. And now, I'm the one deciding who eats. The first message was short. "Camille, it's your mom. Please call." I stared at it for a while. It had come from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew that tone. That trembling, guilt-laced hush. Like she was rehearsing forgiveness through her teeth. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another text came in. "We really need to talk. It's serious. Please don't ignore this. Still no mention of what they'd done. No, we're sorry for throwing you away. No, we regret calling you a parasite. Just urgency, the kind of panic people feel when their safety net is gone, and they realize the one they cut loose was the only thing strong enough to catch them. Then came the voicemail from my dad. His voice sounded rough, tired, worn down in a way I'd never heard growing up. Camille, I know we didn't end on good terms, but this isn't about the past. We just need a little help. Some things happened with the business. We're behind on the house, taxes, then a long pause. We wouldn't be asking if it wasn't serious. Just call me back. I didn't cry. I should've, maybe. But all I felt was this slow, cold wave of realization. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because they needed me. And suddenly, I understood the silence of the last 9 years. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was disinterest. I was useless to them until now. So I started digging. I opened a private browser and searched my father's business. And there it was. Bankruptcy filing. IRS lien. 3 lawsuits. A foreclosure notice posted publicly 3 weeks ago. It was all crumbling. The house they kept pristine? On auction listing sites. The business they prioritized over me? Dead. And I had just signed a 6-figure deal with an international client. My team was expanding. I had employees, interns, an office with my name on the wall. 9 years ago, they bet I'd be nothing. Now they were betting on me to save them. I sat with that thought. I let it marinate in silence. Because this wasn't a movie. There was no epic reunion speech. No tearful embrace at a train station. This was real life. And in real life, when people show you what you mean to them, believe them. I thought about replying. Thought about saying, "Sure, I'll help. Let's meet at that same driveway you threw me down." But no. They didn't deserve poetic. They deserved truth. I took my time. Let them sweat through a weekend of radio silence. And then I sent one line, no greeting. No emoji. No punctuation. You said I'd be back on my knees. Turns out I was just getting on my feet. They didn't reply. And that silence? For once, it was mine. I agreed to meet them. Not because I owe them anything. Not because I had questions. But because I wanted to look them in the eye. And not feel small. I picked the place, a quiet cafe in the nicer part of town. The kind of place they wouldn't have expected me to belong in. The kind of place they used to tell me I'd never afford if I kept chasing dreams like a fool. I wore a tailored blazer. Neutral tones. Clean lines. Power. My hair was pulled back. No loud colors, no revenge makeup. Just peace. And presence. They were already there when I arrived. 2 people who once looked like giants in my life, now sunken, aged by time and consequence. My mother wore oversized sunglasses like they could hide how much she'd been crying. My father looked thinner, grayer, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. They stood when I walked in. My father tried a smile. "Camille, wow, you look..." I held up a hand and sat down. Silence followed. The server came and took my order. A matcha latte, oat milk, no sugar. The same drink they used to mock me for when I couldn't afford it. When we were alone again, I leaned back in my chair and said, "Let's not waste time. What do you want?" My mother blinked. "Sweetheart." "Don't," I said calmly. "Don't start with sweetheart. Just speak." My dad cleared his throat. "We lost the business. It wasn't sudden. It's been declining for years. COVID hit us hard. Then some bad investments. We fell behind on taxes, and now the house is going up for auction." He didn't look at me, just stared at his hands. Mom added quickly, "We didn't come here to beg. We just hoped maybe you could help. With a loan. A temporary bridge. We know you're doing well." I sipped my latte and said nothing. After a long pause, I asked, "Do you remember what you said to me when you threw me out?" They froze. "You said I'd be back on my knees in a month. That I was a parasite." My father looked down. My mother whispered, "We were scared. We thought you were making a mistake." We didn't know how to help you, and we handled it badly. No, I said. You handled it exactly how you wanted to. You tried to break me. She shook her head, eyes watering. We made a mistake. You made a choice. They both went quiet again. I leaned forward. You made me believe I was nothing. And that belief nearly killed me. But it also made me relentless. My voice didn't crack. Not once. And now you're here, asking for help. Not because you care, but because I have something you want. I stood up, left a 20 on the table. You don't get to meet this version of me. You don't get access to her. She's not for you. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking out. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I realized something powerful. They didn't just lose their house. They lost their chance to know the woman they tried to bury. I didn't look back when I left the cafe. Not at the table. Not at them. Not at the years they wasted pretending I was disposable. I walked to my car, a sleek electric coupe I bought cash 2 months ago, and slid into the driver's seat with the kind of quiet confidence you can't fake. They thought I'd come crawling back. But I didn't crawl. I climbed. Step by painful step. The consulting business I started in a cramped studio apartment was now housed in a 2-story corner office with a skyline view. I had 15 employees, 2 assistants, 4 clients on a wait list, a growing investment portfolio, an apartment in Lisbon I used for creative retreats, and a life that was finally fully mine. No more begging. No more explaining. No more apologizing for shining too brightly in a house that kept its windows closed. While they were gossiping at church, I was networking at conferences. While they were controlling every inch of their crumbling empire, I was building something with open doors and honest work. And the best part? I made sure no other girl had to start the way I did. I launched a mentorship program for young women aging out of foster care. I funded college application scholarships. I held financial literacy workshops in the exact neighborhood they told me to stay away from because it was beneath us. Turns out that neighborhood raised me more than they ever did. One afternoon, my assistant burst into my office. Camille, check this out. She handed me her iPad. On it, a video clip. Local news. My old family home in the background. Foreclosure auction signs in the yard. My father stood on the porch, shouting at a cameraman to leave the property. My mother? Off screen, her voice trembling as she said, "This is private. We don't want to talk about our daughter. She has nothing to do with this." But everyone knew. They'd Googled me. They saw my name in headlines. They knew exactly what they threw away. The internet doesn't forget. The comments were brutal. You kicked her out and now you're broke? Karma's wild. I'd ask her to buy the house and turn it into a shelter. Bet she has more class than all of y'all put together. I didn't share the clip. I didn't need to. Because the real revenge was that they had to watch me live, loudly, joyfully, unapologetically, in a world that welcomed me after they slammed the door in my face. I didn't pay their bills, but I did buy something else. 3 weeks later, I closed on a multi-unit property in that same neighborhood, just 5 miles from the house they lost. It wasn't flashy, just a solid building, good bones, good community. I converted the top floor into free housing for displaced women. The unit below it? An art studio. Open to any young girl who wanted to sketch the kind of future she was once told she couldn't have. I didn't put my name on the building. I didn't do press. I didn't need credit. I just needed to give someone else the thing I never had. A soft landing. It happened on a Monday. I was in my office, reviewing design drafts for the shelter expansion, when reception buzzed me. "Camille, there's a woman down here. Says she's your mother." My heart didn't skip. It didn't crack. It just went still. I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and looked down. There she was. Same stiff posture. Same beige trench coat she wore when she dropped me off at church socials. Same eyes, but now swollen, tired, lost. She looked like someone who had finally run out of people to lie to. I stayed at the window. "Tell her I'm in a meeting," I said into the intercom. "But she says it's urgent." "She said that 9 years ago too," I replied. Didn't mean much then either. I turned away. Let the blinds fall. 10 minutes later, my assistant walked into my office, looking uncomfortable. "She's still downstairs," she said gently. "Won't leave." Of course she wouldn't. I gave it 5 more minutes. Then I wrote a note, placed it in an envelope, and handed it to my assistant. "Please give her this." She returned 20 minutes later. She cried when she read it, then left. Quietly. I didn't ask what she looked like. I already knew, because the note said everything I needed it to. To my mother. "9 years ago, you told me I'd be back on my knees. Instead, I got on my feet. You didn't check if I survived. You didn't call. You didn't love me. You left me. And now you want to return, not for me, but for shelter. But you don't get to step into the house I built when you left me out in the cold. This version of me, she's not for you. Return to sender. Camille." I didn't expect her to understand. Because people like her, they think love is just another transaction. Something you can cash in when things go south. But love isn't debt. And I didn't know her healing. Later that night, I stood in the garden behind my building, barefoot in the dirt, watching the wind dance between the wildflowers I'd planted. One of the girls from the shelter came out, shy, maybe 17, the same age I was when I got thrown away. She held a sketchbook in her hand. "Miss Camille," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Were you ever where I am now?" I smiled. "I was. Once." "And what happened?" I looked at her, young, bruised by life, but still standing. And I said, "I stopped knocking on the doors that wouldn't open. Then I built my own house. And I filled it with people who never asked me to shrink." She blinked, then smiled back. She didn't need more. Because some stories don't need to be told in full. Just understood. Sometimes I still dream about that suitcase. The one they threw down the stairs. The one with the broken zipper and nothing but clothes that didn't fit, and a heart that hadn't hardened yet. In the dream, I'm holding it again. But this time, I don't feel fear. I feel gratitude. Because that suitcase didn't carry my ruin, it carried my beginning. It's been almost 10 years since they threw me out with that final insult echoing behind me. "You'll be back on your knees, parasite." And they were right about one thing. I was on my knees. But not in front of them. I was on my knees in the back room of a diner scrubbing burnt cheese off trays. On my knees praying I could stretch $20 across 7 days. On my knees searching library computers for scholarships, jobs, hope. They thought that meant they had won. But what they didn't understand was this. Sometimes the ground is where you plant. And I planted everything. I planted pain. And it became purpose. I planted silence. And it became strength. I planted rejection. And it became resilience. Today, I walk through the halls of a shelter I funded, the one that houses girls who are called too much, too loud, too weak, or too broken. There's a wall in the entryway. On it, painted in soft gold letters, is a quote from one of my journals. "What they threw away grew wild and beautiful where they couldn't reach." People always ask me why I don't use my last name anymore. It's simple. That name never protected me. It erased me. So I gave it back. And took only what I earned. My future. My identity. My peace. A few weeks ago, I passed by my parents' old house. It was boarded up. Grass overgrown. Paint peeling. Empty. The kingdom they sacrificed their daughter to protect was nothing but hollow wood now. I didn't stop. Didn't cry. Didn't even blink. I just whispered thank you to the version of me who survived long enough to become someone they couldn't predict. And as I walked away, I remembered something I'd once written down on a napkin during my lowest point. They called me a parasite. But parasites only feed. I bled, broke, built, and bloomed. In the final scene of this life, the real life, not the one they imagined, I'm not on my knees. I'm at the front of a room full of girls, teaching them how to sign their first lease. I'm standing in front of crowds at conferences, telling the truth. That healing doesn't always come with apologies. That sometimes the closure is you deciding the story ends on your terms. And most of all, that the family you're born into may bury you. But you're not a corpse. You're a seed. They threw me out thinking I'd wither. But I became the storm that watered my own roots. And now, everything I grow grows beyond them.